Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Roundtable with Joey's Legacy. I have with me in the house, we're going to go quickly because a lot of times we don't get to some of the questions because I talk too much. But so I'm going to introduce you to, right now we have one of our attorneys with us. So I'm so happy to have met you through this organization, and you're just such a fabulous attorney. So we have Anna Morrison-Rordati with us. And so Anna, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit you're in Colorado, correct?
Nope, I'm in Chicago.
Oh, I just got done having a conversation with her about how I was just in Chicago. I knew that. So I know you know a lot about the law in other states, but in Chicago particularly, that's the only place that you can practice law, correct?
That's right. All attorneys are licensed by state. And that's just because the laws will vary, by state, sometimes pretty drastically. But the general concepts of law are the same. But if you have an issue, if it's a specific legal question, you really need to go to an attorney, in your particular state to answer the question specifically, because the law, may treat a case that has the same facts, very differently, here in Illinois as compared to, say, like Texas or maybe New York. So, while we talk about a lot of the general concepts that apply and some of the things we've observed, nationwide and locally, it really does matter. If you have a specific legal question, you got to go to the attorney that's in your state.
But you're going to be able to help us out with general questions. Unless someone's in the state of Illinois, then we can send them to you, right? But generally speaking, we know just from doing this a lot, but maybe some of our listeners don't, every state so far now considers our pets property, correct?
Yep. Every state, their property. It's just that I guess legality, morality don't always mix. So just know that's a big distinction. But yes, the 50 states, they treat our animals as property. But what we do know in really, truly every state, because there are felony laws on, fighting and things like that, is that they are treated different. It's sort of like a legal fallacy, if you will, because it's, our animals are far different than tables, toasters, or chairs. And I don't know of any anti-cruelty to tables, toasters, and chair laws, but they do exist, for animals. And, it's clear, when you talk to anybody who's had a companion animal in their home, that their animals are worth far more to them than their possessions. I mean, you even think about, in a fire, what do you go back for? You go back for the dog, for your cat, for your bunny, everything else. It's just stuff.
Nobody goes back for a toaster. I
No.
don't. With us also tonight, Scott's but such a busy guy. Sometimes he's not always with us, but he tries to. So I want to introduce you to, because this wouldn't even exist without Scott Fine. So with us also tonight is Scott Fine, who is the founder of everything that we talk about, which is Joey's Legacy. So Scott, I'm glad you're here tonight.
Hello, Carrie. Hello, Anna. How are you guys doing?
We're great. We're great. We're just trying to get these laws changed and work together. It takes, right, Scott? It can't do it by ourselves. We need such a village.
We just started a push for tighter laws. As most of you know, Delaware is the first state to enact such legislation, which would allow veterinarians in the state of Delaware to accept blood titers as proof of immunity against rabies. We've been working with Anna and several other attorneys in other states to try to get this enacted as well. Obviously, the goal is to have all 50 states on board so we can eliminate this over-vaccination, which of course leads to permanent injury and in some cases death of our companion animals. So that's one push we're involved in right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of, from my experience as a vet tech, I think a lot of the veterinary malpractice comes from, and as Scott, I'm sure, can talk more on this detail, is the wrong medications are given, the combination of medications, and the timing of when medications are given. In Scott's case, it was a blood test that should have been ran, correct, Scott?
Yes.
So, a blood test isn't run, medication is given anyway, and then you end up in the situation where the drug companies even say there has to be a blood test run on this, and the veterinarian chooses not to do it. So We're going to be talking about veterinary malpractice tonight. So before we get too started of course, Anna, I'm going to ask you the big giant question. Can you please define veterinary malpractice for us and maybe give us an example or two?
Sure. And I came prepared tonight because I know it's always a little different, to kind of explain to people. But I wanted to start with the Merriam-Webster definition of just malpractice, because what that is, it's a dereliction of professional duty or a failure to exercise an ordinary degree of professional skill or learning by one rendering professional services that results in injury, loss, or damage. And how that applies to a veterinarian is that veterinarians are expected to know more than you or I. Because they went to school to become a vet and they hold state licensing that allows them to practice as a veterinary professional. And you're holding them to a reasonable standard of care for providing those services. So it's not the best guy in the class, not the dumbest guy in the class, just the ordinary care, what you would expect that every veterinarian should know. And if their actions fell below the reasonable standard of care for a veterinarian, then they've committed veterinary malpractice. Some people use the term veterinary negligence. I like the term malpractice because it just sounds more fitting to a professional service that isn't rendered. But in a civil case, you really have to prove that the veterinarian's actions fell below the reasonable standard of care and that but for those actions, the animal wouldn't have suffered an injury or damages. And it's not always as straightforward because a typical I shouldn't say typical, but a veterinary malpractice case can be as straightforward as, say, an animal has cancer in their leg and the veterinarian takes off the wrong leg. Pretty straightforward there. You would expect, and then sadly these have happened.
I've witnessed it.
Yeah, and that in a case like that, you don't always need a veterinarian to testify, because usually what's required in any professional malpractice case is another person of that same skill, whether that's a GP or specialist, the same expected level of skill can come in and say, yep, I reviewed the files and I can see here that this veterinarian's actions fell below the reasonable standard of care, and but for those actions, your animal would not have been hurt. But it's not always, and that's why a veterinarian is usually used to come review the other veterinarian's work, because it's not always so straightforward. Sometimes it is dosing of medications. Maybe it's giving too much fentanyl that you or I might not know. Looking at an anesthesia sheet, we wouldn't have any idea what that would mean. But another veterinarian would say, wow, that's way too high. And that's clearly why this animal passed, or something to that end. Now, malpractice, it's focused on what the veterinarian is expected to know as a veterinarian. It's a higher, or I guess I should say it's easier to prove malpractice than it would be necessarily, to prove like ordinary negligence or something like that. Because ordinary negligence, that's something like all of us, do. It's an example of a veterinarian that would commit an act of ordinary negligence is, say, they're walking your animal in the time of COVID into the facility, and they drop the leash and your animal gets hit by a car on the busy street nearby. These are also things that have happened. But in those cases, that's not necessarily malpractice. It doesn't even rise to that kind of a level of knowledge. It's just ordinary, negligence. But these are all things that are, they're not intentional. Like, it's not like the veterinarian went out and tried to do this, whether it's ordinary negligence or malpractice. Other issues come up later, that, sometimes we talk about in the, in the discussions. Those are different. If the veterinarian did something intentionally, like to cover up the records, to cover up the things that were done wrong, that's an entirely different ballgame. Or if they maybe decided, hey, I don't want to have to pay to fix my mistake here. Maybe it'd be better if Fluffy just dies. And these are horrible things that, actually come up in the context of certain malpractice cases.
Yeah.
Carrie, could I interrupt just a minute?
Please.
Several people in the vet mal group are saying they can't find the video. They're trying to watch us and they can't find us.
Oh, no.
So,
Lori, we got somebody in the background that can try to help us figure out why they're not able to find it. So we will pause for a second for anybody that is watching it. Let us pause for a second here, because I don't want anybody to miss this, and I'll find out what Lori is going to tell us to do here. She's having trouble, she says. There's something going on with the background. Something's going on. So she's working on it.
Okay. I added that comment so people now know we're working on it.
Cool.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. What?
Oh, can they hear us okay, or can they just? Is it just a video?
I think they're not able to get in. So she
Oh.
just texted me and said there's something wrong with Facebook. So she doesn't know if it's on our end or Facebook's end. And that's where they're trying to get in, right, Scott, through Facebook?
Yes.
Yeah. She says there's something with the Facebook, she thinks. So I have it up.
It's not been a great week for Facebook. Just looking at
a lot of people have been saying they're not able to post stuff. They're not out of, I don't know what is going on there, but I've had a lot of people in some of the groups that I'm like, I'm in an admin group, and they're not even able to post links. They're not able to get anything posted. So I don't know, Facebook is, truthfully, in some cases, they really don't want us, and certain things, they're so concerned about certain things being posted. Like if I say don't over vaccinate your dog, I get flagged.
Wow.
I get flagged as an anti-vaxxer about coronavirus when I'm not even talking about coronavirus at all. So there's some stuff like that going on, but
understood. And it's very different for animals, because like what
Sure.
I think a lot of people, and this is where Dr. Dodds would be so great tonight to explain, because like it's, they're giving them a lot of times the same dosage. I mean, it's on a lot of these medications, even for very hugely different weights.
The difference between like human vaccines, like if you look at like the coronavirus, for example, and I'm no expert, but I can tell you that in animals, vaccines are grouped into two different groups. They consider them non-core vaccines and core vaccines. Mm-hmm. And so, but a lot of veterinarians will just group them all together and go, here, everybody gets all of these vaccines. When in fact, a lot of vaccines, your dog would never, ever come in to be exposed to something like that would need the vaccine for it. So, and I've even seen, I had a woman, this was years ago, it was really sad, and she lives in Irvine in a high rise, not a high rise, but like a apartment complex. Uh-huh. She's an older lady. She had an older dog, and she went to the veterinarian, and she was so proud, and I felt so bad for her, but she was so proud that she got all of the vaccines that the veterinarian had recommended. And so I looked at her vaccine record, and I kid you not, there was a rattlesnake vaccine on there. And I said, I thought, oh, she must go hiking or something. But to be honest, looking at her, I didn't think that was the case, but I didn't want to assume. So I asked her, do you go hiking up in Peters Canyon? And she goes, no, I'm older. I don't do anything. And I said, why'd you get the rattlesnake vaccine? And she says, I don't know. My vet just told me to get it. And I'm like, what? Because there's rattlesnakes in the city? Like, I don't understand. Like, It's just, that was a case of a non-core vaccine versus a core vaccine. And that's when I talk about vaccines, I'm talking about not over vaccinating our pets for not only vaccines that we don't require or need, but overdoing them. Like if Dr. Dodds was here, she would be telling you that we don't need to vaccinate for parvo every year. So, and age is a factor, and all of these things are a factor in, and that, to me, that's veterinary malpractice. But as you were talking about with the standard of care, unfortunately, the standard has to shift because it depends on the group. If you put a group of holistic veterinarians together, the standard of care would be that we don't vaccinate our dogs every year.
Right. Well, it also plays into informed consent, because one of the other things that comes up.
I wish they had that.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's part of I shouldn't say that. General legal concept wise, informed consent is something that you need pretty much every situation. But the problem, especially with the vaccines, is that you often do not get veterinarians who will warn people that, although the risk may be small, there is a risk of sarcoma forming, which is, just the injection site sarcoma, which in some cases, it actually is higher. Like certain vaccines have a higher tendency to produce that than others. And if your animal may be sick, maybe there's other reasons too. Like maybe your animal has cancer, and